Champion, ole, ole, ole. That is what a lot of people shout when they're at games, at sports. But I'm looking at the 5 greatest attributes that are common to the top athletes of all time. Now, to be considered the greatest in any sport, you must have certain qualities, but any ordinary person can have them in life and in business too. So you can transfer these qualities, the ones I'm going to mention right now, throughout your life and into innovation, into enterprise. So to be the greatest of all time, you need to be the first name on most people's lips when they think of that particular sport, or again, whatever your choice of thing is, a business or whatever. Of course, there will always be a couple of names that will cause debates or arguments. But to be in the mix, you need to have certain criteria in the first place in order to help you decide on who really is the greatest in the sport, business, venture, or whatever. To be even considered to be the greatest of all time in sport, and we're taking sport now as the example in this, an athlete or player must have the following 5 traits. These are ability. You must be able to do it. Leadership of other people and yourself. Consistency. Do it over a longer period of time. Longevity. We're stretching it out. And you need to be able to overcome adversity as well. Let's look at ability. First and foremost, for a player or athlete to be considered this huge accolade of the greatest of all time within their sport, they must have a great level of ability. Yet they don't have to have the greatest level of ability or even be the most all-rounded one in that sport. That may seem strange to you when you think about it, but let me explain. Being able to dominate in your sport or in a sport of your choice is about being able to utilize what you are good at so that you can overcome an opponent's set of skills. If you're just in an opposition with one other, for example, you have to be able to beat them. In the main, they may have more skills that you have, and they may be faster at them than you are. But if you have just one single fundamental skill of the sport that you are better than them at, then you can beat them every time. Let's look at an example within sport of the sport of golf. Now golf, it's mainly about striking the ball. Of course, there are many ways to strike the ball, and with many different clubs. You've got the driver, which of course takes care of the very long shot. The long irons, which enable the golfer to have more adaptability to their long play, the long holes. And the shorter irons, which give the player a chance at a good approach shot in order to get to the green. And then putting and putters, which provide the finishing finesse. Now, although Tiger Woods is arguably a top golfer, he's probably not as long a driver as, say, Bryson DeChambeau, or as fine a putter as Jamie Donaldson. But you sure as heck wouldn't want to bet all of your money against Tiger to finish behind those two in all tournaments in a given season. I certainly wouldn't be putting my money on those two guys in front of Tiger most of the time when Tiger is at his peak. Now, there are many different golfers who excel at 2 or more skills of the game, but few master each one all of the time. Yet the best golfer that is most comfortable at striking the ball in all ways will generally come out on top. These are basics, but they're also realities, because that fundamental thread of running through all of these various striking skills is the ability to strike the ball cleanly. If you think about it, there are commonalities there. Now let's look at team sports. In team sports, there are many forms of, say, football, all around the world. But just one consistent skill within most of those sports is the ability to kick the ball better than others. Now, we took the example of golf, and that's an individual sport in general, and now we're on the team sport of football. So similar to golf, if a player has a better fundamental strike of the ball than the other players, then they are giving themselves a greater chance of shooting, passing, or scoring more scores than their opponents. David Beckham mastered the right foot crossing of a football in soccer, in football, right? Wherever you are in the world, you might say the word different. But as the great George Best, the Northern Irish and ex-Manchester United player, once said it, he said, quote unquote, David Beckham, he cannot kick with his left foot, he cannot head a ball, he cannot tackle, and he doesn't score many goals. Apart from that, he's alright. Right. Bestie had a bit of a sense of humour at the end there, but he's being very, very honest. And Beckham was alright as he regularly topped the UK sporting rich list. So if we think of success, if we think of this core sport and what you can do, there's a great example. Now many great players can be dominant at one skill that teams and opponents then create tactics to stop them from playing in their way. But the sheer skill of the great player will outshine what has been put in place to stop them from playing. Such can be their extreme ability. Remember what I said, this ability, that it can change the way the sport is played for years, to come even after they have competed in sport. So, like decades even later. Staying with sport as the main example here for your performance, to be even considered the greatest of all time in a sport, you must show leadership. Still, you do not need to be the greatest leader in the sport either. And this is where a lot of leaders across the world, sport and business, fall down. Leadership comprises of many different attributes. Even the greatest leaders, say, outside of sport, usually don't possess all of these attributes. Think of your president or your past presidents. But to lead in sport, to be considered a great player even, you need to show some form of leadership at some stage of your sporting career. Let's look at another sport now. For example, we've looked at golf and we've looked at the team sport of football or soccer. So let's look at tennis now as an example. In tennis, Pete Sampras showed leadership when at 19 years of age, he was the youngest ever champion at the US Open. He later stated that winning more than his opponents was important to him because, quote unquote, that is how I was raised. Now, by Sampras trying to win all of the time, he was attempting to lead himself into the record books by having the most wins. And Sampras, we know, was a great player. But although being a great player in a team sport is important, having the ability to lead others on the team so that you can get the best from their individual ability, I mentioned ability before, and collective ability is a great attribute to have. So the question is then, what does that mean? Well, this means that you are more than likely going to be on the winning team more often than not if you use this leadership. Another example would be Richie Mccoy. Now, Richie Mccoy was the winning captain in 2 Rugby World Cups for the New Zealand All Blacks. The famous New Zealand All Blacks, these guys are incredible. McCoy got the best from his players in field of play. And he once said, quote unquote, "Sometimes the worst experiences are the ones where you learn the most lessons." Now that's really important. The worst experiences and the best lessons. How could that be? Because McCaw proves here that a great athlete must be prepared to learn from their mistakes and to contribute to have a chance at all of victory. Now think about that across your life. When you fail, we fail all of the time. Think about it in your business, how you can learn from the defeats. Another thing is consistency. To be considered the greatest of all time, an athlete needs to be consistent. Now most sports are measured over one season. And again, we can liken this to business, to life, to consistency. In sports, they use a quantifiable measurement system of league tables in general. And they break down all of this by a series of league positions. In this way, other statistics can be easily deduced from individual athletes and team performances. So if we go back to another example of team sport, in American football, the complex but fairly designed league system is the Super Bowl. For example, within that, as the National Football League, or NFL, has 32 clubs, they need to be fairly divided up so that all teams receive a fair chance of winning. They're separated by putting teams into one of two conferences, in which there are 4 league divisions within each conference. Now, you're thinking 4 and 2, it gets simpler. Because the overall Super Bowl winner is considered to be the greatest in that given year, because they too have come out on top of those teams, all the 32 teams from the various divisions. Now, great players often come from great teams, and that's why the New England Patriots from the Boston area, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Dallas Cowboys, and of course the San Francisco 49ers have many of the greatest players of all time. Why? Well, these are the teams that have won the most Super Bowls. So it works one way and the other. Let's look at another individual sport now. Eddie Merckx, cycling. Eddie Merckx is considered by many to be one of, and depending on the time you were born and you finished your cycling as a child, maybe the greatest cyclist of them all. He's from Belgium. Now this Belgian won, believe it or not, 11 Grand Tours in the 1960s and the 1970s. His ability to win cycling tours was so consistent. It was just like incredible. 11 in 2 decades. Consistency. Another thing though, and closely aligned with this, is longevity. Now I just mentioned Merckx over 2 decades, but by being the greatest of all time in sport, you need to have this consistency regularly. So there's a deepened amount of time here. In doing so, it demands for you that you play or perform over a longer period than others in their sport. And again, you can put this across business. Tom Brady, for example, started playing in the NFL, the National Football League, in the US in 2000. And then he spent over 20 years with the New England Patriots. There he won 3 league most valuable players MVP awards and 6 Super Bowls. Brady was so great that he was the only quarterback to spend as long playing for the same team in the NFL. Now that's pretty impressive. It's also pretty loyal. In golf, going back to a guy I mentioned, Tiger Woods, well, he spent a record 683 weeks of his career being ranked as the number one golfer in the world for 683 weeks. One of the tricks of becoming the great player in a sport, though, is to maintain a high level of performance. The word maintain, sustain, very close. And it's not just about consistency, but again, over sustaining it over a period, a longer period. This time frame must be longer than most other players that have ever played that sport before. So again, think of your business, think of your life. You lose today, learn from it, and move on. Another way is overcoming adversity, because many who overcome adversity have had problems. And if we look at sport, many considered among the greatest of their sports of all time have overcome some forms of a setback in their careers or lives. Some of them, by the way, have been absolutely huge. For example, believe it or not, the great Leo Messi of Barcelona and then later PSG and Argentina was a child when he was considered too small. Yes, too small to ever, as an adult, play professional football. And so what they needed to do, because they knew he had ability, was for him to undertake treatment, to make him stronger, to make him a stronger player before eventually, then he was given a professional contract. Because this guy could do anything with a ball, but his body didn't show it. Perhaps the greatest basketball player then of all time and the greatest swimmer of all were the two Michaels, Jordan and Phelps. Yet both Jordan and Phelps had one thing in common, perhaps more. They had ADD, or attention deficit disorder. It's also called in many ways attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. Yet they overcame this adversity. As baseball great Derek Jeter said, quote, "There may be people that have more talent than you, but there's no excuse for anyone to work harder than you do." So, we look at sport, we look at business, we look at life. By using other attributes together with your ability, great players, great performers in sport and life and business get there because they work by making themselves that way. Thankfully, they do this so that we can all debate on who really is the greatest of them all. So, hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please subscribe. And until next time, when I will be busy making another video for you, have a wonderful day.